Welcome to Vassals of Kingsgrave. Today we'll be discussing the first season of HBO's new series, Looking. This episode will have spoilers for the first season of Looking, as well as possible spoilers for the TV shows Girls, The L Word, Queer as Folk, Quantum Leap, and A Song of Ice and Fire. Today's host is me, Amanda, middlecyclone on the forums, and I'm joined today by Lady Griffin.
Hi, this is Katie.
And Cal Woodedge.
Wadegi.
I was doing so good. Alright, Cal Woodegi. I'll get it now. Alright, so I thought I'd start off with a brief, synopsis about Looking just to get it started. Looking is a show about three gay men named Patrick, Augustine, and Dom, who are approaching the ages of 30 or 40, respectively, living in San Francisco and trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. We start the first season with Patrick attending a wedding of an ex, Augustine prepping to move out of his apartment with Patrick to live with his boyfriend in Oakland, and Dom meeting his now successful old boyfriend. Patrick has a terrible date and he ends up meeting Richie, a barber who works at a Latino drag bar. The show explores issues of relationships, class, identity, sexuality, and race in San Francisco and the second tech boom. To start off, let's talk about what we like and dislike about the show and general feelings about the first season, and maybe give a lemon rating.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I'd probably give the season probably a 4 out of 5. I was really, really nervous during the first 15 minutes because I thought the dialogue within the first 15 minutes of the first episode was terrible. Like, weirdly bad. They were trying really hard to set it in a time and place. Like, we're talking about Instagram and OkCupid and Facebook. It felt a little straining about trying to set us up and orient us in time and place. But then as soon as Patrick gets on his first date, I was like, okay, I get what the show is. I'm good. This is great. In general, I like slice of life shows, so this was actually kind of right up my alley. I thought a lot of the blind date scenes are especially cutting, maybe painfully familiar. There's really nothing I disliked about it. I found the characters at times really despicable, but in a great writing way, in that they're, as I think it was you, Amanda, who said it on the forums, that they're not afraid to show their characters being occasionally bad people. So yeah, I dug it. I don't know what else to say about it until we get into maybe the deeper character arcs.
Thank you for that. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, I would also give it a 4. Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
I would also give it a 4 out of 5. What do I have bad to say about it? Nothing really. It was just, I just really enjoyed it. I found it very relatable, very modern. Perhaps too modern at the start, some obscure references, but yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree with both of you. I would also give it a 4.5 out of 5. I liked the fact that, we'll get into it more later, but all the stuff with Augustine and Richie felt very real to me as someone who's Latino and queer, in the way that things can happen like that with class differences causing conflict in a way that's really interesting. And I just generally thought the writing was good. And it's nice that there's shows now about gay couples having babies and things like that, and that interests me. But at the same time, it was nice to have a show about people having a prolonged adolescence in a way that I feel like hasn't necessarily been represented in the same way, except for maybe Queer as Folk. And I feel like Queer as Folk is very dated and at times very racist.
Yeah.
Queer as Folk is also a soap opera. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's the only other queer show that I've really seen, and I was not impressed with that. It was just, yeah.
I think, I don't want to get too sidetracked with that, but I enjoy Queer as Folk, but it definitely has very real flaws. But it gets better.
I love Queer as Folk, and I've thought about doing a VOK for a while, and not to get too derailed, but yeah, that show gets crazy.
It does. All the stuff with Hunter.
And just there's a bombing in that show, and a serial killer in one season. Yeah, I don't think there's any comparison. I think the show is much more on the level, and like I said, a slice of life. Whereas Queer as Folk is just, it's a guilty pleasure.
Yeah. What do you guys think about the comparisons with Girls? Because I've watched both, and I don't really, other than the fact that they're both about people that are in their late 20s, early 30s, for the most part, I don't really see the comparison.
I haven't seen Girls.
I haven't seen Girls.
Yeah, I have this very convenient HBO Go account that I have access to, so I've watched most of the HBO at this point. Anyway.
Actually, one of my Game of Thrones DVDs, I think it came with a sample of Girls, which was odd, and I really should watch that.
do you guys want to talk a little bit about maybe each of the main characters' storylines a little bit?
Do you want to start with Patrick?
Yeah, let's start with Patrick. Do you want to start with that, or should I?
You lead in.
All
I have a
right,
lot of
cool.
thoughts on Patrick.
So do I. All right, so Patrick's arc is kind of wrapped around him finding himself in a weird way. He works at a video game company, if you're unfamiliar with the show. And if you're unfamiliar with the show, there's a lot of spoilers in this episode. Anyway, so he works at a video game company, and he is living with Augustine, and he's watching Augustine move on, and he's trying to build his career more with that, and also to find a relationship. One of his exes has recently gotten married, if I recall, and so he is just trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life. He goes on a blind date that's incredibly awkward, but feels very real to me as well. And he ends, and we can talk about that more. But he ends up meeting Richie, who's a guy around the same age as him, who's a Latino who lives in a different neighborhood than Patrick, who's a white man, who's played by Jonathan Groff. So anyway, he lies to Richie and says that he's a doctor after he's gone on this bad date with a doctor, and it's very weird because they never pick that up again, and I always wonder if I was sitting there episode after episode thinking, does Richie still think he's a doctor?
I know. I was really confused at first on how they even managed to hook back up later, since he gave him the wrong phone number. But at the end of that episode, I think he does see Richie on the street, and that's presumably how they set things on the level again. But yeah, I kept waiting for that to come back. But I guess it's misdirection, or just that's their meet cute, as I lied about my profession, and that's endearing.
I would really find
It's a
that.
comedy, guys. It's a comedy drama or a dramedy.
This is not a dramedy. I don't know who decided the label. This is just a straight up drama. There's funny bits, but I don't know. I don't think this is tonally a comedic show.
No, not at all. I mean, it's kind of there's some humor, but it's not like a haha comedy show. Yeah. Anyway, Richie and Patrick have some weird they end up going out, and they have some weird misunderstanding because everyone becomes really obsessed with the fact that Richie may or may not have been circumcised. And so it becomes this weird thing about fetishizing him, and then Richie picks up on the fact that that might be something that Patrick's going for with him, and so they have a misunderstanding, and then Patrick has to clear out the air with him and be like, no, I'm not actually trying to just randomly hook up with you. I would actually like to date. But I don't necessarily believe that Patrick is sincere in that.
I think Patrick is very fixated on this idea that he has this idea in his head about what it means to be a gay man living in San Francisco, and that his friends are presumably living that life. They have this very or in his mind, sexually adventurous, independent lifestyle. And he's a kid out from Colorado who hates that his friends see him as being sheltered. And so I think a lot of his training is the fact that he wants to be this person that he's not. He's he tried out cruising in the first episode, and he kind of played it off as a joke, but I think there was some sincerity in that he's like, this is what you do when you move to San Francisco, you hook up and you find people in the woods, and it all rings very false because that's not who he is. And so, I don't know, Patrick he's frustrating, but I think he's just adorable because, like you said, he's trying to figure himself out, and he's doing it in the worst possible ways, and then he'll lie about it and stumble and then have to correct himself, and then correct himself in in the most awkward ways possible.
Yeah, I definitely identify with Patrick in a lot of ways that are a little shameful to me.
I do
It's sort
too.
of like that fine line between, you want that physical pleasure, but then you also want a genuine relationship, and yeah, it gets a little blurred when you're in a gay relationship sometimes.
I feel like that first date he goes on, the blind date in the restaurant, might be one of the most cutting things I've seen on TV in a long time. Which is just, you feel every gut punch where, how long was your first relationship? Oh, 6 months. What about you? Oh, 5 years. And it's you can feel it leaping off the tracks, and it's all the things that he's insecure about are being brought to the forefront, and it's every worst blind date that you've ever been on is right there on screen.
Yeah, it's my understanding, though I haven't done the online dating things, that sometimes it can feel like that, or be like that people are just will just stop talking to you very quickly. Because they have a very because it's kind of the nature of that at times can cut out the the social niceties, because you're looking for people in a different way. But I can't necessarily speak to that because I only used OkCupid for a little bit, and now I'm married, so I guess we should move on with more of Patrick's storyline. Yeah, so after he and Richie have a bunch of misunderstandings, they end up like continuing to go on dates. There's a lot of they just like continue to like misunderstand each other, and this is like greatly increased by the fact that Patrick begins to have this weird crush on his new boss at work. They meet at a work party where they're launching a new video game, and the guy has just come in, and Patrick like has a weird he has a lot of like really awkward interactions with people in general, so I feel like that's going to get said a lot. He is trying to figure out if this guy who's playing the game is gay, and then it turns out that it's his boss, and it like becomes very awkward, and they continue to have like weird flirtiness, and it's very strange for me because it's the actor is also on the British Being Human, so it was strange to see him in that context as this like gay video game developer. I'm sorry I can't think of that character's name right now, but
the actor that plays him is Russell Tovey.
Yeah, I don't know. I find that whole storyline with like Patrick and with the sexual tension with his boss like really boring and a little sad, but I understand why it happens.
You can see the direction it's going on. Like he's set up to be the Betty and Veronica. Which one's the bad one? Like it's not going to actually lead anywhere.
Yeah.
He's an obstacle.
He is.
It's there to it's just not support. It's there to further derail what's going on with Richie, which is both of their faults. I think it's more Patrick's fault than Richie's fault. I think Richie I think he's thin-skinned about some things, but probably rightfully so. Whereas Patrick is just this casually racist bundle of mother issues, as condescending as that sound, who explodes at his guy friend for going to a wedding with him. I mean, I kind of don't blame him for the hookup with the boss, because in my mind I thought that relationship was over anyway at the time. I thought that was very
interesting to see what Richie thinks of that in season 2, or if it gets brought up, or if it just gets ignored.
It seems like Richie's going to be on season 2, which I'm glad for, but I'm also interested in how they're going to make that work. And I'm wondering if it's going to involve...
I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, because I actually really like
Richie's no way, Richie's the first guy, They're destined to be together.
I think Richie is too good for Patrick. That's not a slight... Well, I guess it sounds like a slight against Patrick, but I think the way Richie is written is he feels very wise and maybe a little too perfect, and I don't know, I cannot see...
that stupid obsession with psychics and stuff.
That was cute. I mean,
he seems money, but
he seems way more mature than Patrick in a lot of ways, and like I said before, he's very defensive, and Patrick is continually tripping over his feet and putting them in his mouth, and I can't see something like that incident in the park about, they ask what Richie does for his job, and he's like, oh, I'm a barber, and then Patrick's like, but only for right now, It's like so bad, and I was like, I can't see Patrick getting better at handling this relationship. It seems destined to fall apart. I feel like this is the trajectory that the show is on, is that all three of these main characters are self-sabotaging individuals.
Yeah, and Patrick's hangouts with class are so intense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, Michael, I cut you off.
Oh, no, it's fine. Yeah. I'm of the opinion that they'll be together, and this will be an opportunity for Patrick to mature as a character, but that'd be more unconventional and interesting. They just can't, they're just not right for each other.
Yeah. I'd almost rather watch a show about Richie, but I'm glad that, if it's gonna be a show about another, white gay dude, that, Patrick is, and, the three of them are at least, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, a lot of other stuff happens, but at the crux of the end of the season is the fact that Patrick cheats on Richie with his boss, and it's very weird, and it becomes very clear that Patrick has been used by his boss, and he just, Patrick's face, Patrick lets his boss do things sexually with him that he wouldn't let Richie do with him, and so it makes it's like you see on Patrick's face that he's just afterwards that he feels immensely guilty and terrible and it's like he's even more lost than he was before. And then Richie is like standing outside of his apartment, and then Richie basically is like, I think I could fall in love with you, but I'm not gonna let myself do that because you're not ready.
I feel like his boss gives him this big awkward confessional speech in the office of like, it's so hard to work with you day by day, but as soon as they're putting their clothes back on, he just seemed very smug. I was like, oh no, this was like you said, you got used.
Yeah.
This is gonna make office talk very difficult.
Yeah. And I feel like his boss, like, just from the way he does that, it seems like it's a pattern for him.
Yeah, he's a cheater.
Yeah.
A serial cheater.
Yeah. And it makes you kind of feel bad for the boss's boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Unless he's like that too and they have like a weird, like an open relationship or something. But it doesn't seem like that. It just like felt like a conquest. But I don't know. He's not like featured except as he relates to Patrick.
Well, he'll be returning as a regular in season 2, I believe. So much more sexual tension and awkwardness once you...
Probably emphasis on the awkwardness over the sexual tension.
I think the thing I liked about that storyline, even though it was like kind of obvious that it was going to happen, is that it just like felt like that. It just like it felt like Patrick was tracked on a stupid trajectory to make a huge mistake, but in that way that other people can see you're going to make a huge mistake, but like sometimes you as a person can't see that you're about to do something dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, does anybody have anything else they want to say about Patrick's storyline?
I have to say,
I think...
go on.
You go first.
Oh, I
Okay,
was gonna say
yeah.
the thing that I actually found most interesting about the conversation that I think surprised me the most because I had never heard it on any other television show is it's in the bottle episode Looking for the Future when Patrick and Richie go to the planetarium and they have this long discussion about the sexual dynamics between men and their past sexual dynamics, and Richie eventually asks him, would you be embarrassed if your mother knew what you did in bed, specifically if your mother knew that you bottomed in bed? And Richie and Patrick's like, yeah, I guess I would. And I found his relationship with his mother to be fascinating because even in the very first scene when he fucks up that cruising expedition into the woods, and he tells his friends, when you called me on my phone, I was so sure it was my mom, and he has like this awful repressive background, and I found that intensely relatable, where it's like, I don't know, as a queer person who comes from a repressive family, that idea that there's always this slight panic in the back of your head, like, what if my parents find out that what I'm doing, like, are they judging me in some way secretly behind my back? I found that conversation actually to be extremely fascinating.
Yeah, it felt very real.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, you had some other stuff you
Yeah,
wanted to
basically
share?
what I was going to say. Just with the mother issues, I mean, like, now that being gay is very mainstream, there's that drive to impress your parents, to bring someone home that they're going to like, and yeah, I just thought that was really real, really feel that with Patrick.
Definitely.
And it also doesn't overblame the mother, I think. I think it's important, that conversation they have where she's like, I treated you badly before, but I've changed, and that was in the past and we're in the present, and if you still feel that way, that's on you. And I thought
Yeah, this is certainly Patrick's issue.
I was like, yeah, that's totally fair, and I could see in a lesser show them having this blowout confrontation with the mother, like, you did this to me, or something like that. So I was glad that it was, I don't know, it kept perspective.
Exactly. I kind of felt like that was good. They were gonna have a blowout, and then they didn't. And it was like, this is actually a really well written show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, how about we move on? If no one else has anything about Patrick, we can start talking about Augustine.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Augustine, you are so unlikable.
I think out of the three, he's definitely the toad, but there's a lot about him that I find really sadly relatable. The same way that I find Patrick sadly relatable.
That's fair. Do you want to start and talk a little bit about Augustine?
Basically, the trajectory for his arc is that at the beginning of the season, he moves out of Patrick's apartment. He goes to Oakland with his boyfriend, and his job, I think he works at an art gallery or an art installation. And is that right? Correct?
It seems like he's assisting an
He's
artist.
an assistant, yeah.
Setting up and taking apart arts installations. He's also an artist who is currently not working. He feels undermotivated and isn't quite sure why he can't work. So he eventually runs into CJ, who is a sex worker / rent boy, and gets an idea for a project which basically involves filming or photographing his partner having sex with CJ. He fails to mention to his partner that CJ is a sex worker, which becomes a huge issue later. When his partner eventually does find out and essentially kicks Augustine out of his apartment, at which point Augustine pops a lot of E and then goes and stumbles back to Patrick's place. Is that all the bullet points?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Augustine also has really weird interactions with Richie.
Yeah, well, he's like, I can't be racist. I'm Latino. I was like,
I love that they went there though. I was really glad because I feel like a lesser show would not have like gone there and been like, yes, there is classism within the Latino community. It completely happens, and also where he's from in the Bay is relatively fancy because Richie I think lives in Oakland. Yeah, but
yeah, it's really embarrassing when he's telling Patrick, you're slumming it, and then Richie overhears him and comes over, and Augustine tries to be cool, and he's like, hey, hermano, and it's like, dude, just stop. I mean, yeah, Augustine is, I mean, I sympathize with him in that feeling of being a creative person and not understanding why you were stymied, and I think there's something relatable on how terrified of failure he is. At one point, his partner gets him into a gallery to present his work, or work that he barely has, and in a panic, he calls up the gallery and says, I'm pulling out. I can hope you can find somebody on short notice, which is just a huge snafu and foobar's, if you've been invited to a gallery and they have a space reserved, I mean, that's terrible, but I think it speaks to how terrified he is of falling flat on his face. And I think what his partner tells him at the end in the last episode, which is that you're never going to be an artist, and if you ever rise high enough that you're going to put something out there, it's going to be mediocre. And I felt like that was a absolutely slap in the face, but also a harsh truth, because I don't feel like Augustine is somebody who's ever going to get his feet under him enough to actually finish anything.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I initially really liked Augustine in the beginning for some reason, and it just like as he continued to like lie to his partner and just like generally be really like small and cruel, it just, I don't know. It was funny though when he took the unicorn picture that he'd made out of dicks and he destroyed it.
I just don't understand why he didn't tell his partner that CJ was a sex worker. I don't know why that conversation was not had. Or maybe it seems like he had illusions very early in the season, like we're in an open relationship, it doesn't matter, but apparently it did matter.
Which his boyfriend was obviously not okay with. Like you see it the first time he initiates it with that guy. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about these things, people.
Yeah. I'm glad that this show doesn't fall victim to if they just had that conversation in a way that's believable. I feel like the people not having the conversations in this actually feels real, because Augustine's not self-aware enough of himself, and he doesn't care enough about his partner's feelings to actually realize that, oh, my partner doesn't actually want us to be in an open relationship. He gets really jealous, and I'm not going to have a conversation with him to make him feel better about his like jealous feelings that he's having, or to like comfort him.
I felt so bad for his boyfriend, who basically had to beg to get him into the gallery. That was rough.
Yeah. His name's Frank, I believe.
Frank. I was like, I was reaching. I could not remember.
Yeah. No. He was I really liked that actor in general. I thought he was very excellent with what he had to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we could see him in season 2, but I don't really see how.
Yeah, unless they decide for narrative brevity, to have him and Richie date. Because they're both more well-equipped to be in relationships.
They would be nice, actually. That'd be a good couple.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ship that now.
Yeah.
Get your looking fanfic out there.
We haven't even gotten to Dom and Scott Bakula yet.
Captain Archer. I love it.
Yep. Alright, so I don't really have anything else to say about Augustine. I don't know if you guys do.
I don't either.
Yeah,
that's all.
Ugh.
He's terrible.
He is terrible.
But a little bit sympathetic, but more terrible.
Yeah, he's incredibly self-destructive.
Mm-hmm.
I guess let's move on to Dom. So Dom starts the season. He lives with his good friend, whose name I can't remember. She's female, and she's a nurse, I believe. Or
Doris.
Doris. And we can talk about Doris in a minute. and whether she's a real character or not. But anyway, so Dom starts off the season. He's like working at this restaurant, and he's been working there for a really long time. And it's like through him you get to see like through his eyes you get to see like restaurant workers and like working class folks during the tech boom, and how like all these like technology folks and like these young millionaires have moved into San Francisco, and it's just like really changing the shape of the city, I think, in some ways. They don't get as deep into it as they could, but I feel like there's the potential for them to get into that more. But maybe I have too much faith in this show. So Dom, anyway, he ends up meeting his ex. He ends up calling and then later meeting with his ex-boyfriend, who we find out had stolen a lot of money from Dom when he was addicted to crystal meth, but now is like intensely successful as a real estate agent in Southern California. And they have an incredibly awkward lunch or breakfast where he pays for the coffee for him, even though this man is like very, very rich. And then this ex-boyfriend ends up just being like, I really appreciate you, but now I'm a transformed person. I can't actually help you or give you the money that I stole from you, but light and love.
Yeah, there was some hair splitting. Like, was the money given to him as a way to get clean, or was it actually... I don't know. The situation is very bizarre, but I did find that conversation in the restaurant to be so painful, where he says, oh, when it's so clear that he has moved on and moved up in the world, and he says to Dom, 8 years ago you were at Zuni's and tearing your hair out and wanting to burn the place down. Where are you now? And there's just this awful silence. It's like he's in the same damn place he was 8 years ago, and you can feel the shame just radiating off of him.
Yeah, I think what it is he gave him money to go to rehab, and then he ended up using the money on drugs.
Mm.
And I think ended up going to rehab later or something. It was a little confusing what exactly happened. But
I was mad. I was mad on his behalf, though. I was like, come on, dude. Give the money back.
Yeah, but of course he doesn't.
Mm-mm.
Because he's an asshole.
Yeah, he comes across as like which one is it, psychopath or sociopath, that are like, can be superficially charming, but are just ultimately really manipulative? Yeah, that's it.
I don't know that he's necessarily a sociopath, but he definitely exhibits the behaviors of someone who has a really intense addiction.
A user.
Whose their first priority is their addiction. And then and it seems like with the amount of money that he's accrued, that in his change of his life, he's just now consumed by greed. But yeah. So Dom's storyline is basically based around him he wants to start his own restaurant. And so he ends up meeting, because he doesn't, he's almost 40, and because he's a lot older than his friends, and he's just like, I am sick of working in this restaurant and serving these like billionaires from the tech industry, and I just like want to have my own place where I can make Portuguese chicken, because my dad made Portuguese chicken in this tiny restaurant. And so he ends up meeting Scott Bakula's character, and they end up working together. He's like a crush on Scott Bakula's character, but Scott Bakula has a partner that he owns a flower shop with, but they're not romantic partners. I found that part really confusing too.
I didn't think they were... I thought they were just business partners.
I think they're business partners.
Yeah. Well, Lynn, that's his name. Yeah, Lynn was single.
Yeah, that's right. So Scott Bakula's character is like, I can help you. I'm connected to like other folks who are interested in restaurants and have money, who are in our community. And so they end up having the idea of like Dom having a pop-up restaurant where he can exhibit like the kinds of things that he wants to do, and Scott Bakula will pay for him to do that so that he can, show off his abilities to these like people who are interested in restaurants and hopefully get the startup capital to start his own restaurant. During this time, Dom also reaches out to like former like cooking, like culinary friends of his who work in restaurants and like are chefs and things like that to like try to get them on board with this idea. He ends up having the pop-up restaurant happen with a little bit of help from his friends, but not a ton. Doris mostly helps him with it. Oh yeah, and I skipped this whole part. Dom also like does a lot of like cruising and random hooking up as a person, more so than the other characters do. And so this happens like throughout while he's like figuring out this restaurant stuff. So he ends up having this pop up, and Scott Bakula's character ends up showing up with a bunch of his friends very late, and also his like a guy I guess he's dating. And Doris walks up to him and she's like, Dom's worth it. Made me like her as a character because it's just like I felt like she didn't like they have throughout the season they have a lot of like funny banter, but I didn't really have a sense of her as a human. But then you end up like meeting the guy she's dating and things like that. So it felt less like she was forgive the term, like the fag hag of the show, as can happen at times. So,
yeah, I really like that line. It just humanized her because she was dating Dom before Dom knew he was gay or something like that.
yes, I think that's true.
That was I guess I just didn't get it. We can get back to Dom in a second, since Doris is really just kind of an appendage on his storyline. She didn't do much. Okay, to be honest, I found her intensely annoying.
That's fair.
And it's not. I don't think it's the actress's fault. I just think a lot of the dialogue that she's given is not great. Like, for me, at least, it always feels a little bit like forced banter and kind of back and forth with Dom, and it just she did feel a little bit like a fag hag until that last episode. It never really rose out of that position. I mean, I don't need her to have her own subplot or be a major character in the show that is specifically about gay men, but I don't know. Every time she was on screen, I was just rolling my eyes. I was like, can you just leave?
I could definitely see how you would feel that way with Doris. I think that she could definitely be. She kind of suffers from the same kind of like bantery stuff that sometimes happened with like early on in Sex and the City before the characters found their voices. Like the first season Sex and the City, Doris kind of feels like a little bit with like not with like the privilegey money, shoes, etc. talk so much. She doesn't do that, but like the forced like quick banter, which at times feels forced. Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like her character has potential, but it definitely can feel like she's written by men. Yeah.
Sort of like this inversion, you in Sex and the City you had that one gay guy who was really, well, he sort of got his own character, but he really was just a bit of a slave for the other girls to talk to. And then, yeah, you have Doris, just for the other gay guys to talk to, their own character.
Yeah. So there's not a whole lot more with Dom's storyline. The restaurant opening ends up going okay. Scott Bakula ends up just like being like, I can't work with you in the professional level anymore, and I think Dom ends up kissing him, and I believe that's pretty much where we leave Dom for the season.
I feel like whenever a character on a TV show says, I want to open a restaurant, that is immediately a red flag for failure. Like, this is not going to work out. Not that, I mean, I guess the pop-up restaurant ended up being okay. I actually felt like Scott Bakula, or Lynn, his character's motivations for bailing at the last minute were kind of flimsy. I was like, I didn't feel like Dom blew up at him that much, given the stress that they were under, for him to just toss his hands up and be like, I can't do this, see you around, even though they were business partners up until that second.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was certainly the romantic tension that was building between them.
Yeah, I don't know. The moment that Scott Bakula showed up on the screen, I was definitely very like amused, because I was just like, Quantum Leap. It's like Quantum Leap fan fiction where Scott Bakula gets to be a gay man in San Francisco. But I don't know. I feel like Dom's storyline kind of petered out.
So I have not heard of Quantum Leap. Sorry.
Oh, Quantum Leap was a show that was on in the 80s, 90s. I forget what storyline or time, because I've only watched it in rerun. But it was basically Scott Bakula ends up traveling through time and solving and like taking over other people's like position in life, solving a problem, and then he gets teleported again into a different person's life. And he just like keeps going, and he doesn't think he's ever gonna stop going because of a thing that happened. That's like the worst synopsis of Quantum Leap.
No, I understand that.
It's worth
Wow,
watching. It's a fun little show.
I was intensely distracted, because when I see him, I just see Captain Archer from Star Trek Enterprise.
Yeah. I love Star Trek, but I couldn't get into Enterprise, but from what I understand, it did get better.
Enterprise is terrible, but
Yeah.
it's not Scott Bakula's fault that it's terrible.
Yeah, I don't know. I love Deep Space Nine so much. I've been watching through the 4th season right now, and it's...
That's my favorite Star Trek. We should do a VOK when you're finished.
Yeah, I would love that. Awesome. You should join us for Brideshead Revisited, too, if you have read it.
I can listen to it real fast. I have it on audiobook, I think.
It's worth it. Anyway, sidetracked. So I don't have a ton else to say about Dom's storyline in general. Do you?
anxieties about getting old, which is especially prevalent in the gay community, that just sort of get ignored when you turn 40. That's cool. But yeah.
Yeah, it definitely, Dom's storyline does definitely deal with, like, the issue of, like, aging in the gay community and how it can be really different. And it's also with his age. He just would have been older. He would have been just old enough to be older than, like, when HIV was, like, I mean, it's still a huge global epidemic, but when it was, like, at first was happening, he's a little too old to have been, or it's a little too young to have had to deal with that. And I feel like, as opposed to like Lynn and some of like the older gay men that are on the show, who would have like survived.
He just seems desperate for change.
Yeah.
He latches on to Lynn very quickly. I think he wants change, but at the same time, I think he wants the stability of a relationship.
Yeah, he wants Lynn to save him.
Exactly. Give me money, give me love.
Yeah, it's like he's realized I actually want a serious relationship with a person, and yet I don't. Do you think Lynn and him are actually going to have a relationship?
I don't think any of these people are going to have functional relationships. I could see it working out. Again, I feel like the same way with Richie for Patrick, I feel like Lynn is just light years more mature and realized in his life than Dom is, whereas Dom, I think, is just shiftless and is probably going to end up working back as a waiter at the restaurant.
Oh, sounds so depressing.
I don't know. I feel like these are very self-sabotaging people, and it's good drama when when they screw up, I guess.
That's true. Yeah. So Greg, or Claudius the Fool, had put a couple things on because he wanted to join us but wasn't going to be able to. So, and I think some of them are worth talking about. He compares Augustine to Quentin from The Magicians, which I've read, and I know that Katie's read, but I don't know if you have.
I have not, but I've listened to the Magicians podcast.
I love Magicians. It's one of my favorite books, and I guess maybe you could compare him a little to Quentin in that Quentin can be extremely unlikable and has basically rich kid problems.
Yeah, and he's lazy.
Yeah, and some of that ennui is relatable, and I think some of it kind of edges towards clinical depression, but it's not terribly sympathetic when you're inconveniencing the working people around you who have to support your bum ass when,
You show up at dinner high.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I actually like Quentin a lot in The Magician, so I don't share that opinion, but I can see the comparison.
I like Quentin too, but not as much as I like, I can't think of her name now, I feel terrible.
Alice or
Alice,
Julia.
and also, well, any of the female characters really, except for Jane.
Janet, yeah.
Who's like immensely unlikable, but in a way that I kind of find that girl is so real. Yeah.
Gay clubs? Do we want to talk about gay clubs?
We can talk about gay clubs. Yeah. Something that this show does that I guess we haven't seen as much on gay shows in general. If you look at like Queer as Folk and The L Word and like other gay shows where people are over the age of 21, is that it's not as centered in clubs. And I think that in some ways that's a reflection of the fact that, one, these aren't really the kind of people who would go to clubs very often, except for Dom and Richie, I guess, a little bit. So I feel that there is some club scenes there, but I feel in the show, but I feel like it's more the fact that there aren't a lot of queer community spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of gay culture sometimes can be centered around bar culture, just because that's where the community spaces were for a really long time. And I know that for me, in Philadelphia recently, the only dyke bar, if you're going to use the term, that existed has recently closed, and I feel like we're seeing a lot of like those spaces close and change, and so people aren't going to those spaces as much in like larger cities. But I think San Francisco tends to be pretty different, just because people tend to move there specifically to be like young and gay.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually interesting to me that there wasn't as much club stuff as you would think there would be on this show.
Historically, yes, it's very important. I think that, though, if you look at gay cinema and what gay television there is, I think it can be a little oversaturated in the club scene when, there are other facets to gay community and gay life.
Oh, of course.
Of course, and so I don't mind there not being many club scenes and looking. I mean, if you think about like Queer as Folk, where it was just ridiculous with they just lived at the club 24/7,
Can they
and
afford
occasionally.
that? That's what I want to know. That's so expensive.
See, I mean, there is some of that in the show, but like you said, I think except for maybe Dom, I think I think Patrick is a largely introverted guy. I don't see him being the kind of guy who would go to a gay bar necessarily to get picked up. And Augustine is just a mess and would probably rather hang out with friends.
Yeah, he's too much of a snob. He would.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely. I don't disagree at all with you on that. Yeah, it was nice that there wasn't as much club stuff, but that it was there, but it wasn't like, because there's just like there's so much more to gay culture than clubs.
Mm.
Yeah. In that vein, something I did enjoy was the fact that the representation of Richie and Richie's club and like the places where the fact that Richie is not out where he barbers, but he also like does door at a drag bar, and like how his identity shifts depending on the spaces that he's in.
Mm-hmm.
Like how open or not open he is, which was nice. It was nice that they didn't make it like a big thing about like Latino culture being homophobic, because that's not necessarily true. But about him just like being more open or less.
Right.
Yeah.
As Greg says, though, why can't there be any slightly overweight gay protagonist? It's either slim, sculpted, ripped muscle men or bears.
I mean, I feel like that's just true of a lot of television.
Yeah, it's not exclusive.
I feel like people are TV pretty as opposed to like what Patrick would actually look like as a human.
I also feel like TV sex is, especially like, I have to laugh because it was the same thing on Queer as Folk. Like when people have anal sex in these shows, nobody uses lube, no one uses prep or anything. It's just go and dry. We're doing this right now, and it's just I have to like wince every. It's just it makes me wince every time because they're like, oh yeah, stick it in. It's like, no, wait, you can't just do that. Hang on.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be fun.
There's no lube.
Maybe in the office, Kevin had some lube in his drawer.
He did, which just says something about Kevin. let me just say.
Well, in that sex scene with his boss at the end of the episode, it's like, I don't think they were doing anything. And I was like, come on, that would not be pleasant.
Yeah. Oof.
It's TV sex.
Yeah, it's the same thing when you watch Brokeback Mountain.
Oh God, I know.
God.
I had
one.
Oh, it's so. I just like wince. I haven't watched it in a really long time, but the last time I did, I was just like, oh. Yeah, foreplay is not a priority of the TV. Also, portrayal of gay men having anything other than anal sex is not a priority of the TV.
There's a pretty hot oral scene, though.
There was. That's true. Jumping off of that, I've read some stuff about this. I can't cite anything in particular. It's just about the fact that, like, looking, as opposed to Girls and other shows where female nudity is just, like, a thing that happens, like, even on this show, there's no, like, complete male full frontal nudity on looking, which is not necessarily something I want, but the fact that like in issues of like equal representation of like people being naked in the female form and the male form, it was kind of surprising to me that there wasn't any.
There wasn't more voyeurism.
Yeah, not that I'm like looking for voyeurism, but it's just like if you look at like Game of Thrones, for example.
Game of Thrones is like Game of Thrones has no shame.
Yeah.
I don't know, I felt like what little, the one or two sex scenes that we got, I felt like were pretty classy. I mean, they weren't prudish, but it didn't feel like, I didn't feel like the show was interested in being titillating. Like the whole oral scene was mostly just, it was meant to be more erotic than it was to be, I don't know, sexy. Even though it was sexy.
That's fair. Yeah. It's just like, a lot of people on the internet have been complaining about it, the nudity, and I was like, I'll bring it up. Yeah, but the internet loves to complain, so, as we all know. So, other than that, is there anything anyone else would like to talk about?
Just with HIV and AIDS, do you think as a gay show it's obligated to, I don't know, bring it up, and how do you think it's dealt with AIDS and stuff?
I don't think it's obligated. I mean, it's not like the issue is completely invisible. There's a few, like, comments that are made offhandedly, like, Richie, when he's talking to Patrick, he talks about how his last partner was HIV positive and how, it freaked him out a little to be with someone who was positive, but at the same time he loved him, so they were careful. I mean, I feel like they're conscientious about it, but it's not like a prevailing force in their life as it would have been in maybe another time period, I guess. Which I feel is like how a lot of people treat HIV and AIDS now, which is that you're aware of it, but it's not headline news the way it was, in the 80s or early 90s.
Yeah. It was there, and I don't think they have to, bring it up just because they're a gay show, but yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
it felt pretty real to me in the way that it's like it came up, but it wasn't like a constant thing that they were talking about. I feel like if it had been, since they're pretty much like millennials and Gen Xers with Dom, like it would have felt a little like forced if they like talked about it constantly. But the idea of it being like a pervasive thing that is on people's minds, I feel like they addressed well. Cool. So we can do Marry One Night or whatever.
Bad date with that doctor douche. I don't know.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like what that would be, but
Delete them from OkCupid.
let's do that. All right, because there aren't a lot of characters. So, how do people feel about Patrick?
Patrick, I would sleep with him, but I would give him one night, but I do not think he's relationship material at this point in his life.
Yeah, where he is at the moment, one night, not married.
Yeah.
It's too much trouble.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think maybe in like 10 years, after he's had like one relationship that's gone really badly after Richie, maybe then. But he's got a lot of like bad decisions still to make.
He's only had one boyfriend before, so
I know.
he has time to learn.
He does. He was a late bloomer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so with Augustine, throw him off a cliff.
Throw him off the Golden Gate Bridge.
Absolutely not.
No, yeah, he's like far too deceitful. He's just very untrustworthy. Yeah.
Very selfish.
Yeah. How about Frank, Augustine's boyfriend? Or
Frank seems cool.
Yeah, no, he seems really good. He's marriageable.
Yeah.
I feel like Frank was way, way, way too good for Augustine in any universe.
Yeah.
Just like willing to try to get his artistic career on track and sleep with CJ so that Augustine could make art. I mean, he seemed like he was a devoted partner who just had a really shitty boyfriend.
Yeah, he's that caretaker type that like is like, oh, I can save you, I can fix you. Oh wait, you're not fixable, actually. Yeah. How about Dom?
I would sleep with Dom.
Definitely sleep with. Is he marriageable? Again, I think not in his present state.
Yeah.
He seems a little angry at this point in his life. Or at least frustrated in a way that is not compatible with my needs.
Yeah, he would need way too much. Like he's like a nice guy, but he would need way too much. He would be a project, and I don't need a project. He
Right.
needs to be a whole person. Yeah. Speaking of whole people, Richie, marriage.
Yeah.
Marriage.
Yeah. I love Richie. Richie is the reason that got me through this, like the first season. Even though I really liked the show, I love Richie as a character. Though he feels a little.
Yeah, he really stood out.
Yeah.
He's just so wise.
Yeah.
I mean, he says all the right things when he's like, you worry about way too much, and your parents probably are not thinking about your sex life. It's okay, chill out.
Yeah. It just feels like Richie's been out for a lot longer, or like known who he is for a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
It's just Patrick's so unwise that anyone seems wise in comparison, except Augustine. Yeah. Doris?
I don't know anything about Doris.
I don't know if she's a real person.
She could be like...
She might have some good one-liners and what they say.
Like, Dom could be mentally fractured, and she could just be a figment of his imagination.
That's mean, but true.
His imaginary roommate.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I feel like she's not I don't know that I could do any of those things with her because I don't really know who she is. I just kind of know that she has a boyfriend and that she's like this girl. But maybe she just like, it's like she's like protagonist of her own story, which is not this show.
Yeah, she's a doctor. She wears scrubs.
Yeah. She doesn't like Dom's ex-boyfriend. We know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you guys feeling about are you looking forward to a second season?
When is the next season coming out? Do we know?
2015. It looks like it's going to be coming out.
Alright. I'll watch it. I mean, I like that this show is it's extremely manageable. 8 episodes, 30 minutes apiece.
Yeah, it filled out a character for HBO. Like, it's just, like, very succinct.
Mm-hmm. I was surprised it wasn't an hour long each episode, but pleased at the same time.
Yeah. Not every show needs to be an hour.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, then I want to thank you both for doing this podcast with me, and I hope that it wasn't too weird since this was my first time hosting.
No, you did good.
Not noticeable.
All
Very
right.
pleasurable.
Cool. Well, if no one has anything else, then I'm going to say thank you to you both for joining me for this podcast, and I hope you both have a wonderful evening. This was
Alrighty.
Vassals of Kingsgrave Looking Edition. Great. I'm going to end the call now.
Alright, cool.
Thanks,
Alright.
guys. Bye.
Bye-bye. Here's a question. Would you recommend the L Word? Because I avoided that show for years.
Oh man, I could. Okay. This will be the after show. Feelings about the L Word. Alright, so with the L Word, I would say that it's very much about a very specific community of very rich lesbians in West Hollywood. As someone who lived in LA for a little bit, who is gay, I think that it represents that particular community well. It's definitely a soap opera in the same way that Queer as Folk is. It is. You can definitely tell that the showrunner Eileen Chaikin is like very fixated on like taking control of her story at times that ways that can be really uncompelling. Yeah, it just So anyway, Eileen Chaikin's very. I think the writing's pretty bad, but I think it can be enjoyable. I think there's aspects of the show that are great, and then it can be also very terrible. It's like all over the place as a show. I think Jennifer Beal, who you may know from Flashdance, is actually the reason to watch it because she's really good. I think everybody else, acting-wise, can be all over the place.
For years, like, I had no problem watching Queer as Folk because that is so outside my experience, but I just avoided the L Word because I had this really deep paranoia about it. Like, what if Joe heterosexual in Baton Rouge, Louisiana watches the L Word and is like, this is what lesbians are like in real life?
Yeah.
Like, I had these weird like representation anxieties that just put me off watching the show.
Oh, you should. There are definitely some, like, the first season, it definitely feels like it was geared towards men. A little bit. But after that, it doesn't. But, like, not completely. I'm going to dial that back a little bit. Like, in some ways, the representation of, like, more masculine presenting folks, like, the character Sheen, they're definitely, like, very toned down and made to appear, like, more feminine presenting than that person necessarily would be, though that changes over time. Like, the show definitely evolves. The last season is so bad. I can't even. Oh my god. It ruins everything that the show was about. So you can't watch it. If you're gonna watch it, watch the first 4 seasons and then don't watch the 5th season. It's kind of like how with Battlestar Galactica at the end, it's just like, ugh, but way worse. So much worse.
I'm totally gonna watch it now.
There's a murder mystery at the end. It's so bad.
Well, Queer as Folk had that too. There was a murder mystery, I think in season 3.
Yeah.
Somebody got dumped in a dumpster.
Oh yeah. That was what I was going to tell you. Okay, so I've watched all of Queer as Folk more than once, and I've watched all the L Word. And this most recent time watching through Queer as Folk, I was like, man, the L Word stole most of the story beats from Queer as Folk. So if you like Queer as Folk, or like can enjoy it, you can definitely put the L Word on while you're doing other things, and like I think it's worth seeing at least once.
That's a ringing endorsement. You can put it on while you vacuum.
No, I like there's certain like episodes that are very good and just like feel very like awesome and about like what it feels like to be in a close-knit gay community with other gay friends who understand you in a specific way. And then there's other episodes where it's just like, what? I don't understand. So take that as you will.
How much female nudity is there in it?
Say it again?
How much female nudity is there?
A lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, a lot. Yeah, a lot. I would say a lot but not like Game of Thrones a lot. Like, it doesn't feel pervy in the way that Game of Thrones feels at times. Game of Thrones people don't throw things at me. I do like the show, but it has its problems.
It's pervy.
I don't think anyone would disagree that, yeah, the show is very pervy.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't feel pervy in the way that Game of Thrones does, I guess, is what I would say.
I had this elderly professor in my college. years and years ago who I remember sat down next to me one day and he was like, "Do you watch The L Word?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, you should. It's my favorite show." I was like, "All right, you're 70 years old and male, and this is uncomfortable, but
That's
he made it."
so. Oof. Yeah,
It-
it's definitely one of those shows where people will be like, "Oh, do you watch that? This is the only thing I know about your community."
exactly, like, you're gay, you must watch The L Word. And it's like, this is why I didn't watch it for years and years.
Yeah, it's definitely nothing like. I don't know if are you on the East Coast too? I forget.
Atlanta.
Yeah, it's definitely. Oh yeah, Atlanta and Philly's gay communities are actually pretty similar, from my understanding. That's cool. Because that's where I am. No, but they. It definitely is not going to feel anything like your community, and it's very like rich, mostly white people.
That's not surprising.
Yeah, but Jennifer Beals is the reason to watch the show, like completely. Like I really like her, and Pam Grier is on it
Okay.
and plays her sister. And she starts off. Pam Grier's character storyline is so all over the place, but I think that she finds an element of truth even in the most inane dialogue, and it's worth watching for her as well.
Alright, I'll watch it.
That was so all over that. I don't know. I feel like I can't say something completely positive about it, but I can't say something completely negative about it either, because I feel like it was important to me in a time and a place when I watched it.
Right.
Yeah.
Michael, are you in a storm drain?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Or are you a swamp monster?